This is Timothy Donnelly, and I'm coming to you from my floor in Brooklyn, and I'm going to be reading Rain Moving In by John Ashbery. The blackboard is erased in the attic, and the wind turns up the light of the stars, sinewy now. Someone will find out, someone will know. And if somewhere in this great planet the truth is discovered, a patch of it, dried, glazed by the sun, it will just hang on, in its own infamy, humility. No one will be better for it, but things can't get any worse. Just keep playing, mastering as you do the step into disorder this one meant. Don't you see, it's all we can do? Meanwhile, great fires arise, as of haystacks aflame. The dial had been set, and that's ominous, but all your graciousness in living conspires with it, now that this is our home, a place to be from, and have people ask about. All right, so one of the things that made me want to choose this poem is my admiration for the way that Ashbery here seems to be drawing from three pretty separate discursive registers, but he integrates them into sort of one articulation, one enunciation, one lyric poem. I'd say that those three registers include kind of a more down-to-earth farmhouse kind of register that gives us things like the attic space or the haystacks later on, maybe that dry patch that we hit. These all have a sort of rural life kind of quality to them to me. And then this other one, which is more poetical, a little bit more sublime, gives us things like the night sky and the idea of the great planet that we might discover the truth on, and then the fires that are ablaze. It's a more poetical, a more elevated idiom. And then we have this other one, this third one, which is makes me think a little bit of mid-century cinema. It gives us things like film, notes like film noir, and a little bit like melodrama. Parts of the poem that say, "Someone will find out, someone will know. Don't you see? It's all that we can do, and things can't get any worse." This particular kind of these components of the poem that maybe pretty much predominate the middle of the poem, which is sort of like really reinforcing the sense that within the setting that the first quarter of the poem builds, or within that setting and that sensibility, there's something quite, we reached a kind of crisis, and there's even the sense that more is on its way, with the ominousness that comes at the end of the poem, and also with the title of the poem, Rain Moving In. So we know that we're under threat, and we will continue to be under threat, but what is it that we can do to get through? We can continue the mastering as we do the step, which suggests a little bit like a dance step that can kind of get us to where we need to be. But also, ultimately, it's that graciousness in living that comes in at the end. The poem has part of what keeps it together within these three different discursive registers is Ashbery's own sense of form and his phrasing. And I think that these three discursive registers, or these three sort of fields, were very much within him as a person, as a poet. The poetical, the rural, having grown up on a farm, and then also something about that pop cultural idiom that comes in through those melodramas. It's a little bit camp even in that regard too, I think. But the poem has a sonnet-like quality for sure. It's a 14-line poem. To say that it's written in loose iambic pentameter would be to go too far. I think it isn't. But the first two lines do suggest a kind of almost like an iambic pentameter. They each have 10 syllables, and I think that there are pretty much like 5 strong stresses in each of them. I think there's another line a little bit later on that has that same kind of morphology. But it's really the volta. I think it sensitizes us to the fact that there will be a kind of turn happening in the poem, and it happens a little bit later on than one might traditionally expect, I believe. To me, it happens in that movement where we see the dial had been set, and that's ominous. What the dial is here specifically, I don't exactly know, but there's this sense of there being things that are outside our control, forces that are a bit, on par with the more sublime idiom that we see in the poem, almost a sense that that it's fatal, or maybe like a little bit like the dial has been set is a little bit like alia jacta est, the die has been cast, and so this is the sense that like it can't be undone, but graciousness and living can get us through. Courtesy, compassion, a sense of decency, what is required to get us through this crisis. We may be forced to live in a crisis. A crisis may become our home, but it's really graciousness that makes it possible for us to live there. And though we may have to root there individually, it is because of that rootedness that we can branch out to others, to other people who might be interested in what it is, how it is for us, what it is like for us, where we are and where we come from. And it is through that conversation that we are able to form communities and to learn about each other. And so I think that that's more or less why I was drawn to this poem at this particular time, with this notion that through crisis, living in crisis with compassion, with decency, and with courtesy, with rootedness and where we are, but branching out towards other people, we can form a sense of community when we need it most.